This is Main Street with Gary Allen. Now, here's Gary.
And hello, everybody, and welcome to Main Street. Gary Allen with you, your humble host. Hope everything has gone well for you since the last time we spoke. It's been a little bit of a time. I just want to remind you, and I've been asked to remind everybody, that we are on Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. on dbtv.tv. And there's a lot of other great programming on there as well, but it'll be on the bottom of the screen as we go through this particular program. And of course, there's a lot of things that we could be talking about. I hope all is well with you. We've got some very good shows coming up for you next week. Ray Taylor from the art auction that's on over the weekends is going to be joining us next Monday. Ray is a connoisseur, and he's forgotten more about art and art history than most people will ever know. And I'm so looking forward to this. The gentleman and I become very good friends over the last year, and he's kind enough to come on next Monday. So I'm looking forward to that. And of course, Main Street is on every week on dbtv.tv, as well as on the YouTube channel, which comes out when I put it out on Facebook. So without further ado, let me introduce to you now the gentleman who is our guest for today's program. He is a connoisseur of Hollywood knowledge. He is considered a historian, a walking encyclopedia of knowledge when it comes to Hollywood. And we're here today to talk a little bit about the Women's History Month. Would you please welcome the one and only, the incomparable Geoffrey Mark.
Are there three bachelors waiting for me on the other side of the screen?
I told Tommy about the song. I said, hey, let's find that, because I have a copy of it somewhere. I played it for Will Schreiner at one time, and Tommy said, oh, that's an interesting song. I said, yeah, it used to be one of the songs that they played on the dating game, which, by the way, that gentleman who was the host of the dating game just passed away a couple of days ago.
Jim Lang has been gone for quite a while, actually, Gary.
Really? Because I came on Facebook the other day. He had just recently passed away, you know?
No, he's been gone for a while. That happens on Facebook. You know, they post stuff, and if you look really carefully, oh, that was 7 years ago that happened. But they post it as if it's just happening. Anyway, Jim Lang was a great host. You're a great host. I'm a superb guest. Let's talk about William. Sure, Jeff. Women's History Month.
And we're going to talk about Lucille Ball, Ella Fitzgerald, and Ethel Merman, three ladies that you wrote a book about. And we're also going to talk about some other ladies in show business, too. Geoffrey can be found with his podcast. And Geoffrey, tell people where they can find your podcast. Besides being on Facebook, where they can find Geoffrey Mark, where can they find you on your podcast?
Geoffrey Mark Plays Ella is either on the radio somewhere near a city near you, or it's a podcast on every available possible podcast platform. So that's Geoffrey Mark Plays Ella once a week. And then I am co-host of Still Talking, which is a podcast that comes out of Boston, although I'm in Palm Springs. You can hear that every Wednesday, 4 o'clock Pacific time, 7 o'clock Eastern time. Fill in wherever you happen to live. So 2 podcasts a week. And then, of course, my pleasure to be here with Gary.
Yes, and of course, if it's coming from Boston, you want to go to Harvard Yard where they park the car, and they have a good time. I have not listened to the show yet, but I would imagine it's
that was a great Peggy Cass impression, by the way.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that very much. I love Peggy Cass. Peggy and I would often exchange glances at parties. It was a wonderful thing to go through with Peggy. You have written, again, a number of books, not only about Lucy and about Ella and about Ethel Merman, but about people in general. The one book that I'm surprised that you haven't written, and I haven't seen the title, maybe you did, is about your days at Studio 51.
It's Studio 54. And my memories, my personal memories of the disco days and the flings I had, and is coming out in a book called The Devil Was Born in Brooklyn. And everything about my personal life and career will be in that. I'm just, there's 2 or 3 stories I'm struggling with. When you write a book, folks, and you want to be honest, and then there's 2 or 3 or 4 stories where, should I tell that story? Or is that a little too naughty or a little too sexual or a little too personal? So I'm trying to decide. There have been some folks I've known and some folks I've been with in the biblical sense that I'm struggling with whether or not I should tell the stories. But the book is already 98.9% written, and yes, the days of Studio 54 and all that jazz and Freddie Mercury are in the book. I promise.
Okay, do you want to divulge the stories you're debating?
Well, if I divulge the stories, I might as well put them into the book.
No, I mean, you want to at least mention the names, and we can. We can.
If I mention it, I've already told you that it's personal and sexual. If I mention the names, I might as well put them in the book. I'm talking about liaisons with famous people who I don't think it's I'm telling a secret to anyone that I'm gay. With men who were not living a gay lifestyle, men who were married to women, but for whatever reasons decided it would be a good idea to have a liaison with me. So that's the struggle, is how honest. Because you folks who are watching and listening, you love to read biographies. I know you do, and you read them hoping to get some wonderful tittle tattle about other famous people. And a lot of times these books are not necessarily very in depth. Or they, I'm not going to talk about my personal life. Well, then why write a book? So with me, it's not that I'm afraid. If I were reading the book, would I want to read this? And there is always in the back of my mind a little bit, because this is my life and my story to tell. Am I going to hurt someone by telling the story? These people have all passed away, so it's not like they're going to be hurt. I don't believe their spouses are still alive either. But, are there children and grandchildren who might? But then again, who knows if they'd ever read it anyway? Yeah. All right, there we go. You've just talked me into putting these stories back in. They're going in this week. And yeah, I'll finish the book because. And
you said something interesting about, men trying to hide, their closet existence, and they were married to a woman. Well, there were a lot of women in Hollywood, as you well know. We've talked about it off the air many times. Many women who were hiding the fact that they were gay themselves or heavily bisexual, and they were married to men to hide what, what makes the world go round makes the world go round, whatever makes you happy. So, it's not just men that probably were at Studio 54 doing that. There are probably women too.
There are. And I could name you half a dozen. But those aren't my stories to tell.
No,
I'm not into outing people. No, one more, 2 more sentences about this, and let's talk about Women's History Month, because we're getting on a sidetrack here that I don't think our friends are all that interested in. But I think there's something about the creative process. It doesn't make one bisexual or lesbian or a gay man or what have you. Yeah, you are what you are. Well, one is what one is. But I think the creative process, having talent and being able to use the talent, I think people are just a little bit more open about who they actually are and want to explore the many sides of people. This is not news. It's not new. It's been happening since day 5 in history. As soon as there were several men and women, this was an issue. I take it as a compliment that these people chose me. Yeah, I'm nice looking. Yeah, I'm a little famous. I think it's because I'm a nice guy. And they trusted me that if they engaged in things privately, that it would not hurt their careers, their marriages, because I wasn't going to run to the National Enquirer and tell stories.
Yeah.
So
Hey, I get it. I used to, when I traveled on the road with Tubby. All right. Same thing. I mean, people will come up to him, say hello, hello, hi. Tubby and I talked about it numerous times. My sister, who, we talked about it. People are people. Anyway, getting on to what we are here about. By the way, just want to remind everybody, Geoffrey Mark is my guest here on Main Street. He's a walking encyclopedia of Hollywood knowledge. He is one of the finest gentlemen I know. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't know how he feels, but he is like family to me in so many ways. Don't forget to watch Main Street Tuesday nights on dbtv.tv at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Not any other time, but 7 p.m. There we go. It's on the bottom of the screen there. And of course, you can catch Geoffrey Mark on Facebook anytime you want any more information about him. You have written books about Lucille Ball, 2 books, if I remember correctly. You've written a book about Ella Fitzgerald and Ethel Merman. And
well,
the
two books about Ella Fitzgerald. I'm finishing the second book on Lucille Ball, a book on Ethel Merman, and then the Family Affair cookbook with Kathy Garber. I'm going to answer a question you're going to ask, but you haven't asked yet. Why these people? I wrote about women who I felt were the very best at what they did. There is no one. There is no better sitcom than I Love Lucy. There is no better comedy actress than Lucille Ball. Ella Fitzgerald, if you're talking about jazz singers, there's Ella and there's everybody else. That's how good she was. Ethel Merman, the biggest star on Broadway. There has never been a woman to star in 15 hit Broadway musicals who introduced over 40 songs that became standards over such a long period of time. I think the crux of Women's History Month is to remind us that women are brilliant and talented and capable, and other than impregnating another woman, there's nothing a man can do that a woman can't and has often. And we have so often in history squashed the accomplishments of women. That's why there's a Women's History Month, to remind people, look at these powerful, wonderful women and what they accomplished. And I am blessed to have met these people, known these people, been their friends in some cases, and interacted with them and watched them be the wonderful people they are.
The Hollywood scene over the last 65, 70 years, shall we say, go back that far, has seen a transformation of women behind the scenes, crafts table, maybe sound working here, assistant there, blah, blah, blah. There now, they're heads of studios. They're running production companies, full force. They're in charge of their own shows. Like Fran Drescher, she's in charge of her own thing when she's doing something. Lucy, I think you would attribute that Desi was a major inspiration to her to get her career going with the I Love Lucy show with Desilu Productions, which was another thing we're going to talk about too, because that's a very important part, that when Lucy and Desi separated, suddenly there it was. She was in charge. But there are a lot of women now that are running things in Hollywood that weren't necessarily running them 35, 40, 50 years ago. I mean, when I was in LA, it was mostly female casting directors, a few male casting directors here or there, but there weren't women really running the studios like there are today. And I think that's wonderful.
Is there a question?
No, it's just a comment on my part, and I figured, you'd add to it, of the different people
Look, the
that
women
are in charge.
The women were always there. They weren't just craft services and hairstylists. Since silent films, the actresses were always, once the star system started, it was always the women people went to see. The women stars were always bigger than the male stars. But there were women writers and women directors from day one, just not very many of them. In the studio system, it was an old boys system, good old boy. But women broke through anyway. You had people like Katharine Hepburn who didn't want to be attached to only one studio and wanted to control her own career. Powerful women like Betty Davis who demanded better scripts and better directors and better production, and she got them eventually. Lucille Ball, let's clear up something, because people do think, oh, she became a star with I Love Lucy. Lucille Ball was a huge movie star. Lucille Ball made 70 films before she ever heard the name I Love Lucy. And what's amazing about Lucille Ball, if you look at her life, her story, here's a girl who lost her father very early in her life, who lived with her grandfather and mother and brother and cousin and aunt in a house. And due to an unfortunate accident, they lost the house. The family was split up. And Miss Ball was just bound and determined that she was going to make something of herself with her great beauty and talent and provide for her family. And she went to the West Coast, and the minute she had $6, $4 of it was spent on her family. She brought everybody west and built this incredible movie career because she was willing to do anything, and I mean on camera, folks, anything to get ahead. She would play any part. She'd take a pie on the face. She'd be spritzed with seltzer by the Three Stooges, as long as it was good work and paying some money. And she learned and learned and learned and pushed and grew and grew and pushed, so that by the time I Love Lucy, she's 40 years old already at this point. She's a major movie star. Television turned her from a major star into an icon and a legend. That much is true. And yes, Lucille Ball is the very first woman to head not just a major studio, but the biggest studio in the world. In 1962, when she took over Desilu Studios, Desilu was on 3 separate lots in Hollywood and in Culver City, with more sound stages and more backstage and out, everything about a studio you can think of, the biggest in the world. Yes, that was Lucille Ball, because she could. You see, she pushed and pushed. The goal was not to own a studio or to grab power. The goal was to take everything God gave her and do the very, very best with it, and provide a life for her mother, her eventual husbands and children, and her cousin, and her, everybody she loved. She made sure they had a good life. That pushed her into this. Motivation is amazing. She was, all the women I've written about, highly motivated, greatly, highly, geniusly talented, but ambitious, on fire ambition to get where they were. Because honest to goodness, folks, in show business, and maybe in any business, if you aren't on fire to accomplish things, if you're not ambitious, you'll work and perhaps you'll have a very happy life, but you won't gain celebrity or power or control. And these women said, no, I'm not settling. I'm grabbing for everything my God-given talents can get me. Yeah. And I admire them greatly for that. I admire all people who are ambitious.
And with that in mind, it goes back to something that you and I talked about on another show. And we're talking about the daytime people and the women that have been involved in daytime, which in daytime, generally speaking, it's been Susan Lucci and others that have been the big stars, Judith Light, et cetera, et cetera. And like you said to me, you said, these are actors that work daytime, or some of them who move on to movies or whatever. They just want the solid paycheck. They're not interested in the glamour per se. They like the steady work, the steady paycheck, and everything else like that. You can be ambitious to a certain extent, but don't you think, Geoffrey, for some people, though, you can be overly ambitious that you kill your own career before it even gets going?
You have to have a better definition of ambition. Ambition is not being a raving bitch. Ambition is not stabbing other people in the back. Ambition is not being rude or crude. Ambition simply means, pardon my voice, that you're willing to work 24 hours a day to get somewhere, that when you are hired, you do your absolute very best. You're a total professional, and that one believes that one can get to the top. The women I write about, for the most part, were very nice people. Where they weren't nice people is once they became huge, they didn't work with people who weren't professional. I think with all three, Ella Fitzgerald, Ethel, Merman, Lucille Ball, something they all had in common. If they thought you were talented, they'd be your best friend. They'd mentor you. They'd help you get somewhere. But if you worked with them and showed up late or showed up drunk or showed up stoned or didn't care or didn't know your lines or played a bad note once too often, yeah, these ladies would step on you. Not because they thought they were high and mighty, but because the attitude is, Merman said it the best, the whole show rests on me. I show up, I do my best. You have a much smaller part. Why can't you do the same?
Yeah, true. Very, very true.
You know, the Lucille Ball sitcoms, except for the first season of I Love Lucy, shot in 4 days, meaning you got a script, you sat around a table Monday morning at 10 o'clock. Thursday at 7, you were shooting this in front of an audience.
Yeah.
Well, you don't have a whole lot of time to giggle and laugh and be late and take a 3-hour lunch and excuse yourself to go to the doctor. And, you know, I'm going to my dressing room. I'm not feeling it right now. No, there was no time for that.
Yeah.
So in Lucille Ball's case, if you showed up and read the script out loud and mumbled it and weren't already building a character, already she was annoyed with you. No, do your best.
You know who comes to mind when you're talking about all this, you know, showing up on time and doing your best, is a young woman who I adored. I don't know if you knew her or not, but she was like the queen of daytime television. Everybody that you can think of, except for B. Arthur, loved her. And that was Betty White. I mean, Betty White was there when TV first got going. Live TV, she would do what, a 2-hour show or 3-hour show every day out of Los Angeles. I don't know if it was through the rest of the country, but I know in LA.
No, she did a local show 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, and eventually became the host of the show.
Yeah.
And because the producer of the show became Don Feddersen, who became a huge television producer. So yes, Betty was a total pro. There are stories about Golden Girls I'd rather not tell.
No, we're not going there.
It's the only time I've ever heard of there being a contention with Betty. Was there was something. Just accept that there was something there. The only time I ever heard of her just not, okay, let's do this instead. She dug her heels in on something. But I've never worked with anyone who didn't enjoy working with her, including me. I worked with Betty.
Yeah.
On time, total professional. Let's, again, like not unlike Miss Ball, let's get this done. This is a job. Let's be professional. Let's get it done. We can laugh afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah.
We
can go to Pink's afterwards and have a hot dog and get sick later.
Towards the end of her life, when Betty was working in her 90s on Hot in Cleveland, there was more laughter on the set because she was in her 90s, was having trouble with lines and would flub, and everyone would start laughing, not because they weren't taking it seriously, but because it was Betty White. Yes. And you're not going to yell at Betty White for not being perfect because, she was having memory problems, but her talent was there. And again, a total pro. There are no real stars who work long time, who aren't total pros. You can't sustain a career. And women know this even better than men, because women have to be better at men just to be equal. All minorities have that, but we're talking today. But please, my minority friends out there, I hear you. Your minority group has to do the same thing. I hear you.
Yeah.
And I agree with you, but we're talking about women today. Women have to have been better just to be equal.
Yeah.
And the way to be equal is to be a total, serious, ambitious professional.
Geoffrey Mark is my guest here on Main Street. We're talking Women's History Month, and you can catch this program and other former programs on Main Street with on dbtv.tv Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. You can learn more about Geoffrey Mark on his on Facebook, and you can catch his podcast wherever radio and podcasting is. Just look up Geoffrey Mark on his Facebook page, and it'll have all the information you need there in particular. And he's one of the most marvelous walking historians of Hollywood knowledge. But this week we're talking about women in film, and because it is Women's History Month, and we're not talking about women outside of the business, because Geoffrey's expertise is within the business. We could talk about a ton of women outside of the business, but we're concentrating on this.
Let me throw a couple names at you. I mean, that I'd like to talk about because they were important in my life.
Okay.
My one of my closest friends in life, period, Dawn Wells, Marianne on Gilligan's Island.
Yes.
She understood this concept. Dawn worked as long as she did, and Dawn worked pretty much until illness stopped her. So Dawn worked into her early 80s constantly. Not just because she'd been on Gilligan's Island, that's a fluke in life, a wonderful fluke that you get on a sitcom, which only ran for 3 seasons, but was rerun every day for so many decades that she became such an icon. But she worked constantly because she was very talented. She kept herself, her body, her face looking well. She always looked like Marianne, unless she was trying to do some other kind of character. But she worked really, really hard. She understood the professional part of it. When she went touring with my dear friend Marsha Wallace, the two of them would do The Odd Couple, the women's version. And they took that thing all over the United States and Canada very successfully, because here are two really hardworking women who are ambitious, had the talent, and when they curtain went up on a stage, anywhere they were in it to win it. They were there to be wonderful.
Yep.
That's, I think, the history of anyone who's successful. It amazes me that in history, people are surprised that women can be that way. Oh, no, you can't have a woman in power. Oh, she can't make decisions. And they give you the usual nonsense reasons. Yeah. I'm not even going to glorify the baloney by listing the reasons they used to say women can't. Of course, women can. There have always been brilliant women writers. On the Dick Van Dyke Show, again, my dear friend Rose Marie played Sally Rogers, a female writer. They didn't just make that up. There were female comedy writers in the 50s, a lot of them. Madeline Pugh Martin Davis on all the different Lucy shows. The women who wrote for Your Show of Shows and Sid Caesar. There were women who wrote wonderful sitcom episodes for Bewitched, and I Dream of Jeannie, and F Troop, and Austin and Irma Kalish were a writing team. Well, half of that is Irma, who was not only a female comedy writer, bless her heart, but she was also a producer and a head writer, and was wonderful too. And these are, I don't understand, and I don't mean to sound condescending to anybody. I don't understand people not wanting to do their best. I don't understand an attitude of, I'll just get through this, or I'll do what I have to do, but I don't care. If you don't care, don't show up.
It seems to permeate a lot of industries other than show business, the car industry, the airline industry, the travel industry, you name it. There are people who are just like, we used to call it in the Air Force, riding the pine, waiting for the years to clock out. So after 30 years, okay, or 25 years, okay, I'm going to retire now. And, And my brother used to have a phys ed teacher that he worked with down in Dade County that was like that, just riding the pine, just kind of going through the motions. I don't understand it either.
If you do that, you're riding the pine, to use your expression, for 25 or 30 years or 40 years.
Yeah.
You've wasted 25 or 35 or 40 years not doing something that fed your soul and was a blessing to other people.
Yeah.
You know, whether you are a studio head or you are making sandwiches in a fast food joint, do the best work you can. Yeah, now, obviously, not everyone can be a star. Not everyone can be a doctor. Not everyone can make $1 million a year. That's just not how the world is. But if one has the ambition to be the best that you can be, bring your best to whatever it is you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Your life will be a lot happier and you'll be blessing a lot of other people. And I think the women I've been talking about were very aware that their work blessed people, that it made people happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I was walking around yesterday, and this has got nothing to do with women, except maybe it was women who were saying this. Now, everybody knows how I dress. I'm the sparkle guy. I'm a sequin guy.
Yes. You and Rip Taylor.
Well, there's a 1 second story there. Rip Taylor was that way, not from the beginning. But Liberace came and saw him work and took Rip out to dinner and said, "You're dressing like I almost said a dirty word. Sorry. You're dressing like an accountant." And he dressed him up.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of decades later, Rip took me out to dinner and told me exactly the same thing. And Liberace helped make Rip Taylor and me into stars with extraordinary advice.
Mm-hmm.
And but I'm doing what I'm doing, walking around on a Sunday, and the compliments I was getting, not just how great I looked, but I get so happy when I see you. The way your sparkle just lifts my day. Well, that's why I do it. Yes, it makes me very identifiable. It gives me like, oh, there's Geoffrey Mark. He's the guy who dresses like that, like nobody else does. But also the people that it makes happy. The women I'm talking about in show business were really aware of how happy. Dawn knew how happy she made people. She was very aware. And also all of these people really, really, really respected their fans. Now, I have to be honest, maybe Ethel Merman, not quite so much. Ethel was like, yeah, I'm the best. Let's go eat. She didn't signing autographs and being fawned on. She had better things to do with her time, where Lucille Ball, Ella Fitzgerald were very, very aware of their fan base and loved to talk with their fans. And I mean, Ella cared about her fans so much that, let's say, wherever you are, folks, wherever you're watching this, you have a town or a city you live in, and Ella Fitzgerald came to your town or city to perform. And she did her set. She'd go backstage after the set and write down the songs she sang that night, which ones you guys liked a lot. And the next time she came to your town or city, she would make sure to sing the ones you really liked and made sure that the rest of the songs were all different so that she wouldn't bore you. She was concerned so much that you had a good time in her audience that she tailored her concerts and gigs to your town.
Yeah. That's
as opposed to just going out on tour. Here are the 15 songs I'm singing for the next 8 months. No, she didn't sing the same songs 2 nights in a row. So that I think is another part of the triangle, or the ambition and the talent, God-given stuff, but also the respect in show business for the people. People make fun of me. You're such a ham, because I love when people come over to the table and say hello or stop me somewhere. And I love it.
Well, you know that when I call you on the phone, and sometimes when I call you, I'm as down as could possibly be, and it's a fact. And you make me happy. By the time the phone call's over with, I'm feeling a lot better than I did before. You've given me some of the best advice next to my uncle that anybody has ever get. Well, the only other person that gave me better advice than my uncle was Bill Daniels on the set of Maine Elsewhere. But, the bottom line is, yeah, if you can't share who you are and what you are, man or a woman, whatever, with people and be happy for people, nothing makes me any happier than doing something for somebody.
Yeah.
I'm trying to do something today for my brother in Boston, calling the Boston Celtics, and I can't get through to save my life to anybody there. I will. Persevere. But the one thing that I think that separates Ella and Ethel and Lucy is probably the fact that they know what it's like to be without.
Yes.
Compared to what a lot of people who, now I'll be honest with you, I was born into a middle-class family, and I've squandered a lot of opportunities, and I know a lot of kids that were without and have certainly skyrocketed farther than I have. And I've also had some, bad decisions I've made along the way. That's part of it. But these ladies and ladies of their generation, Barbara Stanwyck and Donna Reed was another one who was an excellent businesswoman. Wonderful person, but an excellent businesswoman in every shape and form. Elizabeth Montgomery, people who were without. They compensate. Jay Leno, arrested, 3 times, where his star is on the Hall of Fame for vagrancy. He's never forgotten that. He works his butt off. People work their butt off.
Let me give you
been down.
Our fans out there are screaming. Elizabeth Montgomery was born into great wealth. She did not struggle. Well, her father was Robert Montgomery, the actor. Her mother was an actress. So she was born into show business. She always had money. But the other people you mentioned, yeah, most people in show business, there are the rare people. There are the Robert Stacks, the Grace Kellys, the Dina Merrills, who were born into great money and used the money and the good looks and whatever else they had, and they became celebrities in show business. But most of us in show business came from somewhere, and for whatever reason, we were born with the talent and the intellect. By the way, you can't accomplish being stupid.
No.
And the burning ambition, and that got us from where we were. I was born in the slums in Brooklyn, New York, and I don't think anyone could have looked at me in the crib and said, "Oh, this guy's going to be a star and not live here." And you can't predict that. You can't, because you can have all the talent in the world, but if you haven't got the ambition, and then there is such a thing as lucky breaks.
Yes.
And I've had several of those, but I've always had the ambition. I had no choice in my personal situation. And then we'll get back to women. I was thrown out of the house at 15. Well, okay, I'm going into show business, and I had to survive. I had to have the burning ambition. And I think the women in show business through history, just because they were women, had to have the burning ambition, because they had to play a football game with men without uniforms, padding, or training, and they still had to make the touchdown. And these women did.
Yeah.
It's why we celebrate them.
Yeah.
Because look at what they did.
Yeah, exactly. Geoffrey Mark is my guest here on Main Street. Gary Allen with you. Check us out on Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. on dbtv.tv. Lucille Ball, when she took over Desilu, when she and Desi were divorced, she said to Carol Burnett, I believe it was, that's when she got a plural on her last name for taking over the studio, when I guess she was debuting a new show, a new Lucy show on TV, and they went through a table reading. For people who don't know, table readings are usually on Monday, sometimes maybe on Tuesday. Most of them have been on Mondays that I've ever gone to, where you sit down with the script and you kind of weed out this and weed out that and go over what you're supposed to do and take a look here, take a look there. And the actors that are coming in for the week go through it, the show of what's going on. And she went through a table read, apparently, and it was god awful. And she said, everybody take a break, go have lunch. She went and had a meeting with her executives at the time at the studio for the show. And somebody kind of said something derogatory about her. And that's when she said that's when her name went from Lucille Ball to Lucille plural.
Well, let me give you a little history there. Miss Ball was blessed, among all her other blessings, to have had Desi Arnaz as a husband.
Yes.
Desi was a business genius. In fact, Desi was a genius, period. When, unfortunately, the decision was made that they were going to get divorced, Miss Ball left Hollywood, went to New York, started a musical called Wildcat, giving some space between them. So Desi could run the studio and she could be doing her thing without having to intermingle all the time. Unfortunately, tastes changed in America. In the early 60s, there were a lot of Westerns and drama shows. That was what was driving the industry at that moment. Well, Desi Lou's drama shows didn't do very well, and they were having trouble selling sitcoms. So the decision was made to bring Lucille Ball back to television in The Lucy Show, playing a similar character, Lucy Carmichael to Lucy Ricardo. About 6 months into this, the decision was made that Desi would sell out. So at that moment, not only was she the star of her own show, but Desi left the studio and left the show because he was the executive producer of The Lucy Show.
Yeah.
And she was left with this. Well, when Lucille Ball, before this, had a problem with a script or felt something wasn't right, they'd have a coffee break. She would talk to Desi. They would discuss it. And then Desi would make something happen. Without Desi there, she had to make it happen.
Yeah.
And Miss Ball, because time was short, because there wasn't time to fool around, wasn't necessarily on the set mistacked. And she admitted that. You know, she got right to, hey, blah, 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 this is what's happening. This is the fix I want. Make it happen. Well, women weren't known to do that. And unfortunately, her last real name, that really is her name, Ball, they added an S. They called her Lucille Balls because who does she think she is? A woman giving direction. Well, she showed them who she was and gave direction for 12 more years on sitcoms. So that's one of the problems women always have when they're given power, and it's even worse if they're good with it. See, men don't mind if women take power and they screw up. Men mind it when women take power, are in charge, are writing the words, are directing the action, are starring, and they're really good and successful. Then the men don't know what to do with themselves. Who do they think they are? Who they are? They are another person in our industry who's wonderful. Why aren't you applauding them? Why are you jealous? Why are you resentful? And women have had to deal with this all along. It's why there needs to be a Women's History Month. And of course, we're talking about show business because that's what I know about. But you can fill 3 or 4 or 12 or 87 hours talking about the women in history, the queens, the scientists, the teachers, the writers, the novelists, the poets, the artists, the doctors who have been female and wildly successful and changed the course of human history to make it better. That's what we're celebrating. But we're just talking about the dames in show business.
Yeah. And of course, a lot of them have gone on. I had Stephanie Powers as a guest on this program, and she's gone on to continue running the William Holden Foundation with great success, I might add. And I'm very pleased about that. And you talked earlier about Ella Fitzgerald, and of course, Ethel Merman and her wonderful, illustrious career on Broadway. But when it comes to music, and song, which is something close to me. Ella Fitzgerald is right there. I can't think of anybody who didn't want to work with her
No,
at some point or another in their career. I think Frank, didn't Frank do a number of albums with her, or she
no,
was on a number?
they never did an album together because Ella's manager and Frank hated each other. So they did television work together, and they
Oh, okay.
toured in 1975 with Count Basie all over the country. But
Yes.
unfortunately, they never ever did an album. It's one of those things. It wasn't
Yeah.
Ella's fault. It wasn't Frank's fault. It was just bad blood between two men who were
Yeah.
knocking at each other.
Yeah.
The only people who didn't want to work with Ella, to be quite honest with you, were other African American jazz singers. So, did Karen Carpenter want to work with her? Of course. Did Peggy Lee? Of course. Did Joe Stafford and Dinah? Of course, of course, of course, of course.
Of course.
Sarah Vaughan and Carmen McRae and Billie Holiday, not so much. Because they always felt that there was only room for one, and Ella was the one. And they resented Ella. I can't even repeat to you when Ella started becoming famous.
Yeah.
When Chick Webb died and she inherited Chick Webb's orchestra, I can't even repeat cleanly what Billie Holiday said about her, except she came to watch them work together and stood at the back of the hall where the band was working and called her a name. That name got her own orchestra, and I don't. That kind of... And Ella loved Carmen and loved Billy and loved Sarah Vaughan. She thought they were wonderful, but they were jealous and resentful of her. Because back then, being a woman meant like there isn't a lot of room for any of us. And if one person soaks up all the oxygen, the rest of us can't breathe.
Yeah.
I'm sure Barbra Streisand has gotten the same kind of resentments, because I can't think... Other than Ella, I cannot think of a female singer. I discount like Lady Gaga and certain people because their stories haven't. There's even more to come. I'm talking about in the years we're talking about these kinds of people. Barbara kicked in a lot of doors for women because Barbara, with her manager, really got control of her career. And the songs she would record and who would arrange them and where she appeared, et cetera, et cetera. Today, we talk about all the wonderful women who are working in music. It's just an accepted fact. Well, of course they're big. Of course they're out there. Of course they're selling out stadiums. That wasn't always the case.
No.
Where these ladies had their own management. They got to decide. There wasn't some man deciding for them. It's a different world. Look at the success Cher has had, minus Sonny. Not to denigrate him in any way, but it's
I used to see him. I used to see him in his business right there as you went up, right near the Beverly Center. He had a little place on a corner there as you would go into Melrose when you start to enter Melrose. He had a business there for a while.
It's a funny thing. People think it's the men who do it for the women. I was at Sonny's funeral, and it was all about Cher.
Yeah.
She didn't do it on purpose to hurt him or anything. Just who would have thought that she was the one who was actually the much, much, much more talented and more professional, and had the long-lasting career. She's still going.
Yes.
It's like I keep saying, I don't mean to repeat myself. It hurts my heart that women have to fight still to be noticed, to be accepted, to accomplish. And I wish it weren't so, but it seems like, especially in today's world, without getting political, it's happening all over again, that all women and minorities are going to have to one more time be like Miss Ball and add an S to their name to accomplish.
It's a
Because
shame.
it
It is a
a
shame.
huge shame. And Mrs. Y, when you wanted me on the show, I really wanted to talk about Women's History Month because, not just because I've written these books, it's important to me. I have wonderful women friends who are brilliant and talented and accomplished, and I want to see them get everything they can because they give so much happiness to other people. And I'm here, fighting the good fight. If you notice, folks, I have been very funny this time because I take this very, very seriously.
Well, one friend of yours that was a very funny lady, I never got to meet her, was Judy Tenuta.
Yes.
And that was a woman who had a fight for every ounce of stage time that she could possibly get, because when she was coming up, there weren't a lot of women who were comics. Elaine Boozler and a few others, but Judy had a fight for her time. Besides, Judy did kind of an off-the-wall act compared to standing there with a microphone and telling some jokes, et cetera, et cetera. Judy was into another world, and Judy was a funny, funny lady. And from what I understand, a really wonderful, good-hearted person.
She was a lovely, lovely woman. I adored her. We were very close friends. Let's talk about stand-up and women. That's a good topic for
we got about 5 minutes left.
There were almost none who did stand-up comedy. Really and truly, another friend, Phyllis Diller, Kick Vidorian. By creating a stage character that no one else could tell her jokes but her.
Yep.
And then coming in the door right after her was Toady Fields.
Yep.
And then wonderful, my favorite stand-up person, Joan Rivers. So these three ladies opened up the doors for everybody else. But it was still really, really hard for women. Women aren't funny. Women can't make me laugh, especially in the stand-up world. It's always been a boys' team, and it's almost like being in a men's locker room in the stand-up comedy world.
Yeah.
And these women came in and said, no, we have a right to be here. And people, wonderful Elaine Boozler and other women who came in with Judy. Judy created this vulgar, pushy, gum-chewing, accordion-playing character. And again, like Phyllis Diller, no one else could tell those jokes. They were only funny when Judy told them.
Yeah.
And she was brilliant. She came and worked for me when I was co-hosting and co-producing the Palm Springs Comedy Festival out here. She had them in the, she was going on so long, I had to almost ask her to, like, an hour and a half, Judy, we're not paying you enough money for this. Wrap it up. You're working too hard.
Yeah.
And she cared that the audience had a good time. And I'm hearing you female comics that I'm not mentioning your names. I'm sorry. Just if I mention one, I'm going to mention them all. I'm going to leave somebody out and you're going to be angry with me. But I have a lot of female comics who are friends that I've worked with through the years. As I've been doing stand-up myself for 50 something years at this point. But women created wonderful stage characters so that they could talk about not just women's topics, but they got to talk about pregnancy and making fun of men and the kinds of jokes men couldn't and wouldn't tell. And then then Joan Rivers, her hysterical put downs of Elizabeth Taylor and other people in show business. It was her point of view. Today, we just accept that there are female comics like they've been there all along.
Yeah.
Unlike every other part of show business we've been talking about, they weren't there.
No.
They really weren't there till the very late 1950s. And then until the late 70s, there were just three. And then the world started opening up. And Kathy Ladman and other people I've worked with are so funny and so good at what they do.
Yep.
But it took a generation and a half of time for that to become acceptable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Geoffrey, we are about out of time.
I know. It's a shame. I always love being on with you.
I love having you on, my friend. It is indeed an honor. You can catch Geoffrey Mark on Facebook. You can also catch him on, tell him where your podcast is.
My Geoffrey Mark Plays Ella is on the radio in a town near you, or it's on every major platform you can think of. And I'm on one of the co-hosts of Still Talking With, which is on live, is on Wednesday afternoons, 4:00 Pacific, 7:00 Eastern. And then they will rerun that where you can look for it and find it and watch it later. So those are the two podcasts I've got. We're talking about a third one. And then thank you, Gary Allen. And we're almost out of time. So as I always say, God bless and have a happy.
And I thank you so very much, Geoffrey. And I want to remind everybody, you can catch all our shows on Main Street on dbtv.tv, Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. And from me to you, to all of you, God bless you. Take care of yourselves. And I hope when we meet again next week, we have Ray Taylor. Ooh, the great art historian. We're going to have some fun. Until then, God bless you and take care.